King Varrax stood at his crystalline observatory, gazing down at the swirling blue marble called Earth through the reinforced windows of his orbital palace. His iridescent scales shifted from deep purple to an annoyed crimson as he watched yet another primitive combustion rocket launch from the planet's surface. "How utterly quaint," he muttered, his secondary voice box adding a harmonious layer of disdain to his words. The great leader of the Celestial Empire, spanning 12 star systems and governing over 30 trillion sentient beings, couldn't fathom why the Galactic Council insisted on monitoring this backwater world. These humans, barely out of their planetary cradle, still fought among themselves over invisible lines drawn on their maps. They poisoned their oceans, burned their fossil fuels, and seemed determined to destroy themselves before achieving any meaningful progress. "Your Magnificence," announced Royal Advisor Zenith, his footsteps echoing across the polished obsidian floor. "The latest reports from Earth show they've developed a new form of social media platform." Varrax's laugh resonated through the chamber like thunder. "Ah yes, because that's exactly what an advancing civilization needs, more ways to share pictures of their domesticated animals wearing miniature clothing. They do seem rather preoccupied with their cats, Your Magnificence." The king's amusement was cut short by a violent coughing fit from somewhere in the palace. His secondary heart skipped a beat. That sound had become all too familiar lately. "Speaking of reports, Zenith, what's the latest count?" Zenith's scales shifted to a somber gray. "Another 1,000 cases reported in the Central Worlds, sire. The plague continues to spread despite our containment efforts. Our best minds are there baffled." Varrax's fingers traced the curved patterns on his ceremonial armor, a nervous habit he'd developed since the first cases appeared. His people, the mighty Celestials, had conquered death itself through their medical technology. They had decoded the genome of every known species in their empire, crafted cures for diseases that once decimated entire solar systems. Yet this plague, this invisible enemy, dared to mock their superiority. "And the humans?" Varrax asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Still injecting themselves with dead viruses and hoping for the best." "Actually, sire," Zenith hesitated, his scales flickering between gray and green. "Their vaccination programs have shown remarkable." "Spare me the details of their primitive medicine." Varrax waved a dismissive hand, his claws catching the light of the distant sun. "When they learn to regrow limbs or transfer consciousness, perhaps then they'll earn a fraction of my attention." Another cough echoed through the palace, closer this time. Varrax's scales rippled with concern before he could suppress the reaction. The plague had started in the outer colonies, but now it was here, in the very heart of his empire. In his home. "Your Magnificence," Zenith spoke softly. "Princess Lyra, she's showing symptoms." The words hit Varrax like a plasma burst to the chest. His daughter, his only child. The future of the Celestial Empire itself. His scales drained to a pale, sickly white as he turned away from Earth's bright reflection. For the first time in his 300-year reign, King Varrax felt something he never thought possible. He felt afraid. Grand Scientist Novak's tail twitched nervously as she delivered her report in the palace's medical wing. "The infection rate has doubled again, Your Magnificence. We've lost contact with 3 outer colonies entirely." King Varrax stood before the holographic display, watching red dots spread across the star map like blood through water. Each dot represented 1,000 cases. The display flickered as another colony went dark. "And our containment protocols?" he asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it anyway. "Useless," Sire. Novak's scales rippled with frustration. "The plague adapts faster than our quantum computers can analyze it. It's almost as if it's thinking." Thinking? Varrax barked out a laugh that held no humor. "Next you'll tell me it's sentient." "With all due respect, Your Magnificence, we can't rule anything out. This plague defies everything we know about pathogenic behavior. It systematically dismantles our defensive nanites, turns our own immune systems against us," and she hesitated, her secondary voice box trembling. "And it seems to particularly target those of royal bloodline." The words hung in the air like toxic gas. In the adjacent chamber, Princess Lyra's monitoring equipment beeped steadily, each sound a reminder of his failure to protect her. "How many?" Varrax asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Sire, how many of my people have we lost?" Novak's scales shifted to deepest black, the color of mourning. Conservative estimates put the death toll at 3 billion, but with the outer colonies going dark. Varrax's claws dug into his palms, drawing drops of luminescent blood. 3 billion. Each with a name, a family, dreams, and aspirations. Each now nothing more than another statistic in this nightmare. A violent cough from the next room shattered his thoughts. He rushed to his daughter's chamber, his royal dignity forgotten. Lyra lay on the medical pod, her once brilliant scales now dull and flaking. The sight of her, his fierce, brilliant child reduced to this fragile state, made his heart clench. Father, her voice was weak, but her spirit still shone in those golden eyes. You shouldn't be in here, the infection. Let it come, he growled, taking her hand. I dare it to try. She managed a small laugh that turned into another coughing fit. Still fighting the universe itself? Some things never change. Save your strength, little star. The humans, she whispered, making him freeze. Their medical databases. Not now. Lyra, he stroked her crest gently, the way he had when she was a hatchling. Rest. But father, their approach to viral, her words faded as she slipped back into unconsciousness. Outside the chamber, Novak waited with another report clutched in her trembling hands. Sire, we've lost the Centauri colonies, and the plague has reached the nursery worlds. The nursery worlds, where the next generation of celestials grew, where the future of their species took its first breaths. Varrax felt his knees weaken, grateful for the support of the chamber wall. Your Magnificence, Novak continued, her voice heavy with defeat. We've tried everything in our power. Every treatment, every technology, every theory. Perhaps it's time to consider outside help. Outside help, he snarled. You mean humans? Those primitive apes who still haven't figured out faster than light travel. They've survived countless plagues, sire. Their immune systems, their adaptability, it's remarkable. And their medical research, while crude, takes approaches we've never. Enough, his roar echoed through the medical wing. But as the echo faded, so did his anger, replaced by something far more terrifying: desperation. In the silence that followed, only the steady beeping of Lyra's monitors could be heard. Each beep a reminder of what he stood to lose. Each beep another second ticking away in a race they were losing. Each beep asking the question, how much was his pride worth? King Varrax paced the diplomatic chamber of his orbital palace, his claws clicking against the obsidian floor. The holographic projection of Earth's United Nations Secretary-General floated before him, waiting patiently for his response. The words felt like acid in his throat. The Celestial Empire requests Earth's assistance. There, he'd said it. 300 years of pride swallowed in 8 words. We understand the gravity of this request, Your Magnificence, the Secretary-General replied, maintaining an admirably neutral expression. Our best virologists are ready to assist. We've selected Dr. Isabella Martinez to lead the team. She's revolutionized our understanding of viral evolution. Varrax's scales flickered with barely contained irritation. One doctor? My empire spans 12 star systems, and you offer me one human. Dr. Martinez's work on rapid viral mutation. Father, the cry from the medical wing cut through the conversation like a plasma blade. Varrax's heart stopped. Just send her, he growled, terminating the transmission. 48 Earth hours later, a primitive chemical rocket docked with the palace. Varrax watched from his throne as Dr. Isabella Martinez strode into the grand hall, her short frame dwarfed by the massive architecture. She carried nothing but a small metal briefcase and wore a simple white lab coat, no ceremonial robes, no marks of station. Your Magnificence, she said, executing an awkward attempt at their traditional greeting. Thank you for allowing me to. Spare me the pleasantries, human. My people are dying. 3 billion already lost. What can one primitive scientist possibly do that my empire's greatest minds cannot? Martinez didn't flinch at his tone. Instead, she set her briefcase on the floor and met his gaze directly, a breach of protocol that made his guards hiss. With respect, Your Magnificence, sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the right one. You've been fighting this plague with quantum computers and nanites. But viruses, they don't care about technology. They're the ultimate survivors. You dare lecture me on survival? My civilization was crossing galaxies while yours was still burning witches. And how many plagues did you face along the way? She pulled up a holographic display from her briefcase, primitive by their standards, but functional. Humans have survived countless epidemics. Each one taught us something new. The Black Death, Spanish flu, COVID-19, they're all part of our genetic memory now. Your civilization's medical technology is incredible, but it's made you vulnerable. You've forgotten how to adapt. Varrax rose from his throne, towering over her. You're saying our advancement is our weakness. I'm saying sometimes you need to step back to move forward. She gestured to her display, showing cellular structures he didn't recognize. Your bodies are too perfect. Your magnificence. Your immune systems have never had to evolve, to fight, to adapt. This plague isn't just attacking your people, it's exploiting that perfection. Another cry echoed from the medical wing. Martinez's head snapped toward the sound, her expression shifting from scientific detachment to genuine concern. Was that? My daughter, Varrax said, his voice hollow. The plague seems to favor royal blood. Martinez's eyes widened. Without waiting for permission, she grabbed her briefcase and started walking toward the sound. Show me to her. Now. You dare give orders in my palace. She turned back, and for the first time, Varrax saw something in her eyes that matched his own desperation. Your magnificence, I've spent my life fighting enemies I can't see. I've watched good people die while I race against time. Right now you can either stand on ceremony or you can let me help your daughter. Your choice. The guards looked to their king, weapons ready. For a long moment, only the sound of Lyra's call. He bowed his head to a human. Follow me, he said quietly. And thank you. Martinez nodded, falling into step beside him. Don't thank me yet. We've got a war to win first. As they walked to the medical wing, Varrax found himself studying this strange human who dared speak to him as an equal. Perhaps, he thought, there was more to these primitives than he'd assumed. Then again he mused with grim humor. It wasn't as if things could get any worse. He had no way of knowing how wrong he was. Dr. Martinez stared into the quantum microscope, her forehead creased in concentration. Around her, the most advanced medical technology in 12 star systems hummed and pulsed. King Varrax watched as she pushed aside a 1 billion-credit diagnostic array to make room for a petri dish. Explain to me again, he said, trying to keep the skepticism from his voice, why you're using that ancient technology. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. She adjusted the microscope settings with practiced ease. Your diagnostic systems are incredible, but they're too perfect. They look for exactly what they expect to find. This plague? It's nothing like what they expect. Varrax leaned closer, his scales shifting to deep blue, the color of curiosity. And what do you expect to find? The unexpected, she smiled, not looking up from her work. Your magnificence, what do you know about Earth's cockroaches? Those disgusting insects that infest your dwellings. Those disgusting insects that survived your equivalent of nuclear winter can live without their heads for weeks and adapt to almost any poison we create. She adjusted the sample. Life on Earth isn't about perfection. It's about survival, adaptation, evolution. Princess Lyra's cough echoed through the lab. Varrax's scales rippled with worry. My daughter doesn't have time for a biology lesson, doctor. But she does. Martinez straightened up, her eyes bright with excitement. Look at this, she gestured to the microscope. Varrax had to bend almost double to use the primitive device. What he saw made his secondary heart skip a beat. The plague organisms were there, but they were different. They're dying. Better. They're running scared. Martinez pulled up a holographic display, showing 2 sets of cellular structures. This is the plague attacking your people's cells. See how efficiently it works. Your immune systems are too perfect, too predictable. Now look at what happens when it meets human cells. The display showed the plague organisms scattering, seemingly confused. Our imperfections, Martinez continued, are our strength. Our cells are chaotic, unpredictable. We're walking evolutionary accidents, and that's exactly what we need. But how does this help us? Varrax demanded, his patience wearing thin. Because Martinez said, pulling out another petri dish, we're not the only messy life forms Earth produced. This is a bacteria found in human gut flora. Completely harmless to us, but to your plague. She placed the sample under the microscope. Take a look. Varrax looked again. The plague organisms weren't just dying, they were being torn apart. That's impossible. Our best weapons couldn't. Because your weapons are too sophisticated. This bacteria? It's a brute force predator. No finesse, no complex attack patterns. Just millions of years of evolution teaching it how to kill and survive. A subtle tremor ran through the palace. Somewhere, another medical system was failing. Time was running out. "We can synthesize this bacteria," Varrax asked, hope warring with disbelief in his voice. Martinez shook her head. "Synthesizing would make it too perfect. We need to grow it. Natural variation is key." "But your facilities," she looked around the pristine lab. "They're too clean. We need something dirty, something imperfect." Varrax felt his pride wrestling with desperation. Everything this human said went against thousands of years of celestial medical science. It was primitive, chaotic, unsophisticated. It was. Another cough from Lyra's chamber made his decision for him. "What do you need?" "Soil," Martinez said immediately. "Real earth soil, not the sterile growing medium you use in your hydroponics. I need dirt, microbes, all the messy life that makes our planet what it is." "You want me to bring contaminated earth material into my palace?" "I want you to save your people, your magnificence. Sometimes that means getting your hands dirty." For a moment, Varrax was silent. He thought of his empire's great medical achievements, of centuries of advancement and refinement. Then he thought of his daughter, her scales growing duller by the hour. "Zenith," he called to his advisor. "Send ships to Earth immediately. Authorization for dirt collection." The words tasted strange in his mouth. But as he watched Martinez return to her work, hunched over her primitive microscope, while surrounded by advanced technology she'd pushed aside, he felt something he hadn't experienced in days. Hope. "Doctor," he said softly, "if this works." "When this works," she corrected, not looking up. "When this works," he conceded, "you must tell me more about these cockroaches." Martinez laughed, the sound bright in the sterile lab. "Your magnificence. I think you're beginning to understand humanity already." As he left the lab, Varrax realized she was right. Perhaps there was something to be said for imperfection after all. Not that he'd ever admit it out loud, of course. He had some pride left. Though not, he reflected as another tremor shook the palace. As much as he'd had yesterday, the palace lab had transformed into something that would have horrified Varrax just days ago. Containers of earth soil lined the pristine walls, their rich organic smell filling the air. Dr. Martinez moved between cultures with practiced efficiency, her lab coat stained with what she called good, honest dirt. "The bacteria are reproducing exactly as we hoped," she announced, checking another culture. "But we need them to reproduce faster. The plague is still outpacing us." A medical officer burst into the lab, his scales a panic-stricken white. "Your magnificence. The princess, her vital signs are dropping." Varrax felt his world tilt. "How long?" "Hours. Maybe less." Martinez's head snapped up. "We don't have hours. Show me the latest readings." The officer projected a hologram of Lyra's vital signs. Martinez studied them, her face growing harder with each passing second. "The plague is concentrating in her royal blood. It's like it knows she trailed off, lost in thought. Knows what Varrax demanded. That she's the key. Your royal bloodline, it's not just a title, is it? There are actual genetic markers." "Of course. 10,000 years of selective breeding, genetic enhancement." "That's it." Martinez slammed her hand on the table, making cultures rattle. "The plague isn't just a disease. It's targeting your civilization's perfection, and the royal bloodline is the most perfect of all." She turned to her cultures, muttering calculations. "We need a delivery system. Something that can get the bacteria into her bloodstream fast enough to." The palace shook violently. Warning sirens blared. "Life support failing in Medical Wing B," announced an automated voice. "Backup systems engaged." "We're out of time," Martinez said, grabbing equipment. "I need a blood sample from someone with royal blood. Now." Varrax extended his arm without hesitation. Martinez drew his blood with an ancient needle, another primitive tool she'd insisted on using. She worked with frightening speed, mixing his blood with her bacterial culture. "This is going to be messy," she warned. "Really messy. Your immune system is going to fight both the plague and our cure. The bacteria will attack anything they don't recognize, and in your bodies, that's almost everything." Another violent shake. More warnings. Medical wing C compromised. Quarantine protocols failing. Do it, Varrax ordered. Martinez shook her head. Not you. We need a test subject first. Someone with royal blood, but she met his eyes. Someone we can afford to lose if this goes wrong. No, his voice was like thunder. My daughter dies without this cure. If anyone tests it, it will be me. Your Magnificence. That wasn't a request, Doctor. Martinez loaded the mixture into an injector, her hand steady despite the chaos around them. This is going to hurt. A lot. Pain is temporary. Loss is forever. She pressed the injector to his neck and pulled the trigger. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, fire. His blood was on fire. Varrax roared as the bacteria invaded his system, attacking everything in their path. His perfect immune system fought back, turning his body into a battlefield. He fell to his knees, scales flashing through colors faster than the eye could follow. Hold him down, Martinez ordered. Guards rushed forward, but Varrax waved them back. No, he growled through clenched teeth. I must know what my daughter will endure. The pain built to impossible levels. This was nature at its most primal, a war between perfection and chaos. Through blurred vision, he saw Martinez monitoring his vital signs, her face grim with concentration. Then, suddenly, blessed coolness. The fire receded, replaced by a strange but not unpleasant tingling. Martinez's equipment beeped rapidly. It's working, she breathed. The bacteria are killing the plague, then dying off themselves once they run out of targets. Your Magnificence, your... Lyra, he interrupted, struggling to his feet. Now. But as Martinez prepared another dose, alarms screamed through the palace. Critical system failure in Princess Lyra's chamber. Life support failing. No, Varrax started running, Martinez close behind. They found Lyra convulsing, her scales gray and lifeless. The plague, sensing its defeat, was making one final assault. Her system's too weak, Martinez said, checking readings. The shock of the cure would kill her. There must be something. There is. Martinez was already rolling up her sleeve. My blood, human blood, full of antibodies, imperfections, evolutionary accidents, a buffer between the cure and her system. The compatibility risks, or better than certain death. She turned to him, her eyes fierce. Trust me, Your Magnificence. Trust humanity's mess to save your perfection. Another convulsion racked Lyra's body. Varrax nodded once. Martinez's blood flowed into Lyra's veins, followed by the bacterial cure. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Lyra's back arched, her scales blazing with light. Martinez collapsed, the double strain of blood loss and the psychic feedback from celestial royal blood overwhelming her human system. As guards rushed to catch the falling doctor, Varrax could only watch and wait. Everything he loved, everything he believed, hung in the balance. And somewhere in the chaos, a new future was being born. The first thing Varrax noticed was the silence. The alarms had stopped. The warning systems were quiet. Even the ever-present hum of the palace's medical equipment had settled into a gentle purr. Princess Lyra lay peacefully in her medical pod, her scales slowly regaining their luminescent sheen. Next to her, Dr. Martinez was propped up in a hastily arranged recovery chair, looking pale but alert. Between them stretched a thin tube still carrying traces of red human blood. The plague organisms are dying across the empire, reported Grand Scientist Novak, her voice trembling with barely contained excitement. The cure is spreading faster than the disease itself. Your Magnificence, it's working. Varrax placed a hand on his daughter's pod, feeling the steady thrum of her life force. Strong, stable, alive. How, he asked softly. The human bacteria, Martinez answered, her voice weak but determined. They're not just killing the plague, they're teaching your immune systems how to be less perfect, more adaptable. Like humanity, Varrax mused. Exactly. Your people are still who they are, but now they're stronger. Better equipped to face the unexpected. She tried to stand but swayed dangerously. Stay still, Doctor. You've done enough. Varrax turned to his guards. Ensure Dr. Martinez receives our highest medical care. She is to be treated as royal blood. The guards exchanged shocked looks but complied immediately. Royal blood. the highest honor a celestial could bestow on an outsider. A recognition not just of service, but of equality. Father Lyra's voice, weak but clear, drew everyone's attention. Her eyes fluttered open, their golden color bright and alert. Varrax moved to her side, taking her hand. "I'm here, little star. Did the humans save us?" He looked at Martinez, who was finally allowing herself to be tended to by celestial medics. "No," he said thoughtfully. "They taught us to save ourselves, a far greater gift." Reports were flooding in from across the empire. Colony after colony reporting the plague's retreat. But more than that, they reported something unexpected. Changes. Subtle mutations in celestial biology. Nothing dramatic, but enough to make them more resilient, more adaptable, more human. "Your Magnificence," Novak interrupted gently. "The Galactic Council is requesting an immediate update. They're particularly interested in how this will affect our species' classification of humanity." Varrax straightened to his full height, his scales shifting to a color no one had seen before. A swirling mixture of celestial royal purple and the rich brown of Earth's soil. "Tell them," he announced, "that I have seen humanity's worth, not in their technology, which we dismissed, not in their achievements, which we belittled, but in their very nature, their beautiful, chaotic, imperfect nature." He walked to Martinez's side, towering over her, but now without a trace of condescension. In their willingness to get their hands dirty, in their ability to see strength in weakness, opportunity in disaster, and hope in the darkest moments. "We're not so different," Martinez offered with a tired smile. "We both want to survive, to grow, to protect our children." "No," Varrax agreed, "we're not so different. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all." He turned back to his daughter, who was watching the exchange with bright, curious eyes. The eyes of a new generation. One that would grow up knowing that perfection wasn't everything, that sometimes the strongest metals were forged in the messiest fires. And as he stood there between his recovering daughter and the exhausted human who had saved her, King Varrax finally understood. The universe wasn't meant to be perfect. It was meant to be alive. 5 years later. King Varrax stood in his crystalline observatory, watching Earth's first faster-than-light ship emerge from hyperspace. Its design was unmistakably human, practical, slightly ungainly, but somehow elegant in its imperfection. Much like humanity itself. "The human delegation is ready to dock," Your Magnificence announced Zenith, his scales shimmering with excitement. "And our guest of honor. Dr. Martinez is already in the Grand Hall, though she's still refusing to wear the ceremonial robes." Varrax laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. "Would you expect anything else?" The Grand Hall had been transformed for the occasion. Earth soil now grew real plants alongside celestial crystal formations, a living symbol of their new partnership. The plague had changed more than just their biology. It had changed their perspective. Your Magnificence, Martinez greeted him with the now perfect celestial gesture. She wore her characteristic lab coat, though this one was at least clean, ready to make history. "Thanks to you, we already have," he gestured to Princess Lyra, who was teaching a group of young celestials about Earth's cockroaches. Their scales shifted with fascination rather than disgust. "The next generation," Martinez mused. "They'll grow up knowing both worlds." "Better than that," Varrax said. "They'll grow up understanding both worlds. The value of perfection and imperfection. The strength in adaptation." The human delegation arrived, led by the UN Secretary General. But this was no longer a meeting of superior and inferior species. This was a gathering of equals, each with their own strengths to offer. As Varrax delivered his opening speech, he caught sight of his reflection in the polished walls. His scales still showed that unique mixture of royal purple and earth brown. A permanent reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything, and how much they'd gained by letting go of their prejudices. "Today marks not just an alliance between our peoples," he concluded, "but a recognition of a universal truth. The strongest metals are forged in the hottest fires. The most beautiful gardens contain both perfectly cultivated flowers and wild, untamed growth. And the greatest civilizations are built not on perfection, but on the courage to embrace change." He raised a ceremonial cup filled with real earth wine, another change that would have been unthinkable years ago. "To humanity, who taught us that sometimes the best way forward is to step back. to imperfection, which makes us stronger than perfection ever could, and to the future, which belongs to all of us, together. As the celebrations began, Varrax watched his daughter join the human children in their games, her laughter mixing with theirs in perfect harmony. Sometimes, he reflected, the best changes were the ones you never saw coming.